I was lost and didn't know where to go. I just knew I couldn't go back where I came before. You saw me and had mercy on me.
It's the tip of the CHRISTberg. Don't forget what you heard. It's your boy, Disciple for Jesus, Theo. Just call me DJ Theo for short. What's good, family? This is episode 37. Episode 37 of the tip of the CHRISTberg. And today, what are we going to do that's referencing 37? Well, I went to Google 37. I was about to put in numbers that deal with 37 or things that deal with 37. But I put in 37 first, and immediately Psalm 37 popped up. So I figured I would read to see what it was about and see if it had anything that I wanted to touch on. So actually it's pretty good. When you go through 37, it tells you a lot of the promises of people who follow God, a lot of the things that happen to people who don't follow God. So I just thought it was pretty cool. So Psalm 37, I'm going to read the first 4 verses just to give you a taste of it, but go check it out for yourself and see what else it has to offer. All right. So Psalm 37:1 says, "Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity." Psalm 37:2 says, "For they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb." It's talking about those evildoers. It says, "For soon they will be cut down like grass and wither as the green herb." So don't worry about them evildoers. They're going to get what's coming to them. Then it goes on to Psalm 37:3. It says, "Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed." And then going into where we're going to end in Psalm 37:4, it says, "Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart." So that's out of Psalm 37. Those were the first 4 verses. Go check it out for yourself. Psalm 37, referencing 37 because this is the 37th episode of the tip of the CHRISTberg. And this particular tip of the CHRISTberg is entitled Full Faith. Full Faith. Now, today I'm gonna do something a little different. So I Googled to find out 3 stories of full faith. 3 different biblical stories about full faith, and I'm going to go through those real quick. I mean, extremely quick. We should be out of here about 10 minutes today. I'm pushing it for you. And I'm not going to read the Spiritual Solution itself, but go check it out at Theo Blake on Facebook. But I'm going to go ahead and get into the first 3 examples about full faith. Let's go.
Staring at my cards, I got the best hand. Chips down, face up, and I'm all in. I'm all in.
All right, so the first example that I'm going to give you about full faith comes out of, and everybody has heard this story before. I'm pretty sure everyone have heard this story before, has heard this story before. And it comes out of Genesis 22. Abraham was going to sacrifice his son Isaac, which at the time didn't make sense to Abraham because God had promised Abraham that the Redeemer would come through his family, right? So, and I put in parentheses at the end of this, doesn't make sense. That's one of the main reasons why a lot of people don't follow through and have that full faith on what God has promised them, is because something doesn't make sense, right? Now, Abraham was told by God that now Abraham and his wife had a son very late in life. Like it was like really not normal for them to have a baby when they had a baby. She was barren for a long time. But when they actually had Isaac, God had already promised David that he was going to have the Redeemer was going to be through his family. So it was going to be a part of his lineage. But then God turned around later and told him, "Hey, I want you to sacrifice your son, the only son that he had." Really? So that didn't make sense to David. That didn't make sense to Abraham. That how is the Redeemer going to come through my family if you're telling me to sacrifice my son Isaac, the only son that I have? And we're already late in age, so how's it going to happen? So it didn't make sense to him, but he still had full faith. And as we all know how the story goes, he followed through. And just before he was going to sacrifice his son, God said, "Wait, stop. I see that you really have faith in me. You really trust me, and you don't have to sacrifice your son." But he had full faith and he continued on. So remember, I put in parentheses, doesn't make sense. A lot of times, once God has given us a promise, the reason we don't have full faith that is going to come through is because he'll ask us to do something that doesn't make sense. In our eyes or in our minds, it doesn't make sense. All right. So that story just came out of Genesis 22. Genesis 22. And this next story where I'm going to end is about Joshua, and it's going to end in Joshua 6. Joshua 6. But before I even get to that part, I'm going to tell you how Joshua even came to the point where he was leading Israel in Joshua 6. So, and this is about full faith. A lot of people miss out on the full promise of God because they don't have full faith, right? So Moses was head over the Israelites. In this one particular instance where, and this is where Joshua was showing, Joshua and Caleb, as a matter of fact, was showing their full faith. But Moses actually, and this is before where I'm about to give you now, but Moses actually told 12 spies to go out to this land, right? God told Moses, hey, send these guys out, send some guys out into the land, somebody to represent each tribe. And he said, I need 12 spies to go out into this land, see what's going on in the land, do reconnaissance, pretty much. Go see what's going on. So Moses sent out 12 spies. 10 spies came back and gave a report like, oh, the people in the land are large. They did say some good things about fruit and just good things to get off the land as far as just as fertile soil and things of that nature. But they said, the men they're strong and they're pretty big. That's how it was the extent they said it at first, right? And then that was the 10 spies. They came back with that. Now Joshua and Caleb came back and they're like, true that the men are big, but we serve God. That's their full faith. Now God had promised them that they were going to lead them into the land that was going to be the promised land. This was the way to get there, right? So the fact that God told them that they were going through this area, right? And that they had a promised land on the other end, like once they finally got to where they were going, the fact that God told them that should have been enough of faith for them to just hold on and just say, all right, this is what we see. What do we do, God? That's pretty much what Joshua and Caleb came back with that report, that we can do this because God is with us. He actually said that in scripture. Caleb says that God is with us. As a matter of fact, he even told the rest of them, pipe it down, be quiet. And it got to the point where the 10 spies started spreading lies about the land that they saw would swallow people up. They just really started exaggerating they just flat out lied. That wasn't an exaggeration. And then they said the men were like really, really big, like almost giant size. That's what exaggerated, because the men were big and strong, but they weren't quite that big because they didn't have the full faith like Joshua and Caleb did. So anyway, that was when God basically told Moses, he was like, you know what? I'm pretty much done with these people. I'm going to go ahead and cut them off. Where they said they were going to, because they started complaining about they were going to die in the desert and all this and that. God said, I'm going to go ahead and let that happen to you. And because Joshua and Caleb had full faith, they were the only two adults who actually went in to the promised land. All the other people from there who were under the age of 20, I think what the commentary told me, were under the age of 20, they actually died in the desert just like they said they would. But Joshua and Caleb, who had the full faith, right? Now, in parentheses for this one, I put doomed by what they see. Doomed by what they see, right? Because a lot of times we'll be doomed by what we see. We'll think it's too big, it's insurmountable, it can't happen. And we won't go after the full promise that God has given us. So please do not be doomed by what you see. If God told you he's going to give it to you and you see hurdles and things in the way, trust me, God's going to deliver you through it. Just ask him how. Now, moving the story forward to Joshua 6, moving the story forward to Joshua 6, Moses died. God told Joshua he's going to take over because of his faith, because of his belief, because of his willingness to step out on what God has shown him, despite what it looks like. He wasn't doomed by what he saw. Don't be doomed by what you see. So because of that, when Moses died, Joshua took reign and he led the people over, heading toward the promised land. In this particular case, in Jericho 6, his full faith got him even closer to getting to the promised land where they defeated Jericho. Jericho had these very tall walls, and they had a lot of army on the inside. They were very capable. It's a very strong fortress they had going on. But Joshua, with his full faith, knowing that God that God, and this almost shares with, doesn't make sense, right? Because Joshua, with his full faith, God told him, hey, you're going to go around the walls of Jericho 6 times, and then on the 7 days they did this, but you're going to go around the walls of Jericho 6 days, and then on that 7th day, when they sound their horns, and that's the sounding their horns, that was Jericho inside the walls. When they sounded their horns, that meant they were ready for battle. He said, I don't want y'all to shout, I don't want y'all to sound your horns and shout, charge whatever you, I don't want you to blow your horns. That gives a sign that you're about to go charging. I just want you to just shout at your loudest voice. Don't do anything else, just shout. That's what he told Joshua. So Joshua had the full faith that even though this doesn't make sense, but he wasn't doomed by what he saw. Hit by Joshua not being doomed by what he saw way back when Moses sent him to spy the land, led him all the way to this point where he still wasn't doomed by what he saw. Because a lot of us will see those tall walls. You may think people are too tall for you to get over. You may think buildings, organizations, or just anything that's in the way of what God has promised you is going to be too tall, too insurmountable. So you don't have that full faith and you're doomed by what you see. Do not be doomed by what you see. Just like Joshua did in this story, and that, as he also did when he came back with good report about the people in that land that they saw, that they knew that we could conquer. They knew that they could conquer, unlike the other 10 spies. Don't be doomed by what you see. Okay, so the first example came out of Genesis 22. This one was out of Joshua 6. The next one's going to be out of Judges 7. So far we had doesn't make sense, right? Is the reason that people don't have full faith and don't capture the full promise of what God has told them. And then here we're talking about not being doomed by what you see, so we can capture and have full faith and capture the promise that God has given us. All right, let's go. And we're about to end it in Judges 7. Judges 7. I'm going to read this one to you. God called Gideon to lead Israel into the battle with the Midianites. The Midianite army had about 135,000 men. Gideon gathered an army of 32,000 men, so they were greatly outnumbered. The Midian had 135,000 and Gideon had 32,000 in his army. However, God told Gideon that there were too many men in the army. Now, mind you, okay, God just told Gideon that 32,000 men was way too many men in his army, right? Now, mind you, that the Midianites had 135,000. So that may sound a little crazy to someone where God says, hey, in our eyes, we look like we don't have enough. And God tells us we have too much, right? But listen to why God told him that. Through a selection process, God whittled the Israelite army down from 32,000 men, from 32,000 men down to 300 men. Gideon was scared. It's okay to be scared, but don't let that stop you. When God gives you a promise, keep rocking. But he trusted God to prove his promise. God said they needed a smaller army so that people would know that it was God who won the battle and not the large army. So God was with Gideon, and he told him, hey, I don't want you to use 32,000 men. Even though you're outnumbered, somebody may say you had 32,000 good men, and maybe Midianites didn't have 135,000 good men. So maybe that's how y'all beat them, because you had 32,000 good men, and that 135,000 that Midian had, maybe they weren't so good. God knew that somebody may be able to take it that way as to how they defeated them. So God said, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna have you take them all the way down to 300 men. So when you defeat them, there's no doubt, there's no shadow of a doubt that the reason that you beat them is because I was with you, right? Downside. That's what I put in parentheses for this one. One of the reasons that people don't capture God's promise and don't have full faith is because they get downsized, right? They could get downsized in how much they make, get downsized and possibly lose a job, get downsized in the amount of people who they had supporting them. They could get downsized in a number of different ways, right? You get downsized in belief unfortunately. You can get downsized in a lot of different things, and that can cause you not to capture what God has promised you because you don't have full faith. So again, to recap, the first reason that people don't have full faith and don't capture God's promise is because God will put them in a situation where they think it doesn't make sense. Number two was they were doomed by what they see. We can see something and we think, oh, we can't do it now. I know God promised it to me, but how could I possibly ever beat this? And number three was downsize. God can take us from here to here in what we have, and we think now that He took us from here to here that we can't capture what He promised us because now we don't have enough. We need to keep the faith. As long as we know God is with us and is taking us on our way, we need to keep the faith, keep the full faith. If God promised it to you, He's going to give it to you. All right. So we're going to end it off with this. The scripture shows us, those scriptures that I read from, or that I gave the story from, the scripture shows us that when we don't, the scripture shows us that when we don't have lack of faith, right? Make sure you not do have lack of faith, but the scripture shows us when we don't have lack of faith, in many cases, it causes us not to lack in life. So if we don't have a lack of faith, then we don't lack in life. We won't lack in life in many cases, right? So on the flip side, where there's no faith, then probably there will be lack. Where there's no faith, probably there will be lack. And that's not just hearsay, that's a fact. Hopefully the spiritual solution that's fed you is easily digested and it keeps you nourished until the next spiritual solution you receive. Jehovah elevates and sustains us. It's just as simple as that. God's promise. Follow Christ. Jehovah elevates and sustains us. Believe that. That gives us JES US. I'm Disciple for Jesus Theo. Just call me DJ Theo for short. This is Tip of the CHRISTberg. Do not forget what you heard. Peace.
We live as kings. Staring at my cards, I got the best hand. Chips down, face up, and I'm all in. I'm all in. I'm all in. Tell them young boys that we all in. The kings who I'm reppin', homie. Enemies fold like I got that weapon on. I'm all in. I'm all in. Tell them young boys that we all in.
We say, welcome to the royal family. God is my father. Do you really understand me? Huh? He's really the best example. Cause we can search the whole earth and only find a handful of righteous men. And I ain't talking kings of nations. I'm talking heads of households, fathers who are patient. The sacrificial husband who leads his wife in a loving way. And as the head, knowing he's responsible in every way. Wakes up and dies, plans a funeral. Every day for the man, this responsibility should carry weight. But sadly it doesn't. Jackson, my royal flush, madly in love with the speech of a child, foolish words in his mouth. Compromise everywhere, it's living in his house. And I ain't saying that we're perfect because we're falling. The difference is we get back up because we're all in.
Staring at my cards, I got the best hand. Chips down, face up, and I'm all in. I'm all in. I'm all in. Tell them young boys that we all in. The kings who I'm reppin', homie. Enemies fold like I got that weapon on. I'm all in. I'm all in. Tell them young boys that we all in. Flow is propane in its purest form. Delivery is like a dad seeing his son born. They burn my jersey on the ground like a team scorned. But I swear it's not the heat, I'm just getting warm. Jewels in the crown, that don't make a king. Just cause LeBron's at the helm, you don't got a team. They once told me I was living in a dream. Now it's action, action. They swear I'm trying to start a scene. This movement is so loud. Neon to infinity and beyond. The royal family, this world can't handle we. Cause they can't see us from this planet that we be on. In and out of it, visiting, don't love it. In the end, we in the zone, high stepping like Dion. Yeah, celebrating with the rock for a very long time. Look, the party don't stop.
telling y'all he far above. Bet big, faith high, pride low, we die. Every day we guillotine, heads roll, no lie. Got a full house over here, call my bluff. Chips looking low, I don't think you got enough.
Nah, you ain't got enough, no betting against the team. Yeah, the dealer cut a deal, my hand is pretty mean. But still way above the mean, and the deck extra tight. Ain't no getting in between, no breaking up the fam, tight knit to the scene. When you see the poker face, know you staring at a king.
You staring at a king. See the poker face, know you staring at a king.
Staring at my cards, I got the best hand. Chips down, face up, and I'm all in. I'm all in, I'm all in. Tell them young boys that we all in. The kings who I'm reppin', homie. Enemies fall like I got that weapon on. I'm all in, I'm all in. Tell them young boys that we all in.
We live as kings. We live as kings.